2021 is right around the corner. You're probably thinking about losing some weight, but the biggest question that you're asking yourself right now is, which diet should I do? And just kind of go over what I believe is going to be the best approach if your goal is to lose as much fat as possible in a very safe and healthy way. So we're starting right now. So the three diets that we're gonna explore in this video, which is why you clicked on this video, is keto, intermittent fasting, and also plant-based. And when I say plant-based, we'll look at both vegan and also a vegetarian approach. The way we're gonna break this video up is we're gonna look at each diet, and the way we're gonna investigate each diet is, number one, what does it look like in terms of macronutrient ratios? What might a sample meal plan look like? What are some of the health benefits, if any? What does the science say behind it in terms of, is it effective? And if it is effective, why it's effective? Or if it's not safe, or if it's not the best thing for you, why that is so. So each diet that we look at, we'll go through each one of those things. So let's go ahead and start with keto. So now, what is keto? What does it mean to be in ketosis, and what is a keto diet? Now, for the sake of this video, we're not going to look at all the subcategories of keto. You have things like cyclic, targeted, you have nutritional ketosis. We're just going to be looking at the general principles of what a normal keto diet might look like for something like fat loss. So when it comes to macronutrient ratios, the way that I've prescribed a keto diet to clients is primarily focusing anywhere from 60 to 70% of your calories coming from fat. That's really what's going to make the keto diet. I've seen a lot of people who try to do a very high protein keto diet. Well, that's kind of defeating the whole term, because if you're consuming a lot of protein, that protein is then being broken down and being converted into sugar, so then you're no longer in ketosis. And the whole idea behind a keto diet is to get you into ketosis as fast as possible. So when it comes to a keto diet, you have to make sure that the majority of your calories are coming from fat. Now, how you want to then change up the carbs and the protein ratio, well, you probably shouldn't be eating more than 5% of those calories coming from carbohydrates, and then the remainder can go into protein. Now, when it comes to ketosis, there are a few things for you to know. Now, while there are some health benefits and some research that shows that being in ketosis can be a good thing for fat loss, there's probably equal amounts of studies that show when you are in a caloric deficit, it really does not matter at the end of the day. So when it comes to ketosis, we have to be thinking, okay, it's not necessarily going to accelerate fat loss, but what are some of the other health benefits that I might get from it? So I'm gonna give you the three things that I really like about a keto diet. So number one, you're gonna feel more satiated. And I think when it comes to any diet in general, the more satiated you can be, the more likely you are to stick to that diet. Now, the second reason that I like keto is because it's simple. And when I mean simple, I don't necessarily mean easy. Simple being that when you look at what your nutrition will pretty much look like, it's very simple. Maybe in the morning you have eggs and bacon, and then maybe for a snack, you have a bulletproof coffee. For lunch, you have something like salmon that's cooked in butter with some veggies. And that's kind of what your meal plan is going to look like, right? So you're really focusing on getting in fats, snacking on things like nuts and seeds, cooking with butters, etc. So the meal plan is pretty simple, pretty basic. Doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to follow, but if you're not hungry and you're feeling satiated, hey, if it works, it works. Another really cool health benefit about keto is some people say that they just feel better, right? I know when I tried keto, I did notice a little bit of this brain fog removal. And that's kind of one of the first things that people will say when they go on keto is you will have this kind of like this temporary period of just feeling absolutely terrible, which is what people call the carb flu. But then once that goes away, you do get this little boost of like complete mental clarity. And people call it that it removes brain fog. And this is really your body switching from using glucose as fuel to now running on something known as beta hydroxybutyrate, which is just pretty much your body is now using ketones for that fuel source. But like we said earlier, calories still matter. So if you're not being careful with portion control, you can pretty much go on ketosis and not lose any weight. You might even gain weight. So just because you're throwing butter in your coffee and you're having pork rinds for snacks and telling all your friends about it doesn't necessarily mean that if calories are still not accounted for, that you're not going to be gaining weight. The only reason why people feel that they can get away with that is usually coming from the fact that they're feeling more satiated, and usually the calories control themselves because they're not eating as much. But at the end of the day, you still need to be controlling your overall calories. Now, when it comes to some of the health implications about keto, there is some research out there that kind of shows that long-term ketosis, or following a keto diet for a long term, especially in kids, it's really going to stunt growth. And the reason behind that is because the idea behind keto is to try and keep your total insulin levels down. And when you keep your insulin levels down, it can be very effective and helpful for people with insulin resistance or who need to reverse their type 2 diabetes, because it's a great method because you're not producing as much insulin, right? So it makes sense where if you have health conditions, maybe following a keto style approach can be very beneficial for you. If you'd like to know more about reversing insulin resistance and my top tips, just go ahead and watch that video up there. But now when we look at the research when it comes to long-term exposure on a keto diet, you will notice that when we look at those studies on stunted human growth, that's because you're not producing insulin. So insulin's kind of like a double-edged sword where you have, on one hand, it is necessary for growth, but then on the other hand, well, if you've already abused your body's insulin production and you are a type 2 diabetic, then you don't need it, right? So not producing it could be very beneficial. But if you're young and you're growing or you're healthy, insulin production is a good thing for you because that's how you are driving nutrients into the cells. So when you're looking at starting a keto diet and whether or not it's right for you, just some things to consider and take in mind. And now this is why we're really going to go into the next diet that I think is the more popular one as of recent, and that is intermittent fasting or any form of fasting. Now, I've personally been using an intermittent fasting approach with clients, and also a modified fasting approach for myself, which I will let you know about at the end of the video in terms of what I'm doing for my own nutrition at the moment. But when it comes to intermittent fasting, when it comes to your macros and everything, it really is up to you. The way I would suggest it personally is that you're still prioritizing protein first and foremost. So anywhere from 30 to 40% of your calories are coming from protein. If you need to lose fat, then 20 to 25% of those calories will be coming from carbohydrates, primarily looking at non-starchy vegetables. So thinking about prioritizing your carbs coming from those versus things like breads and pastas. Obviously trying to limit processed carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates as much as possible. And then the rest of your the rest of your percentage of calories will be coming from healthy sources of fat. So you're going to be looking at maybe like a Mediterranean style approach. The macronutrient ratio really does not matter. The thing that makes intermittent fasting a diet is really when you're eating. And that is what makes IF or any type of fasting approach a really unique thing. Because really you could potentially do a intermittent fasting keto approach the same way you could do intermittent fasting as a vegan. So while I included intermittent fasting as my second diet choice, it really is more of a method of how you eat versus a diet trend. But we call it a diet, and so that is why we're just going to go with it. So now, what are the three things that I like about it? Well, number one, it's so simple. I said that keto was simple. Intermittent fasting is just way simpler. And the reason why is because you have 16 hours of just focusing on something else, right? So usually the intermittent fasting approach that is the most popular is something known as like a 16-8, where you fast for 16 hours and you have an 8-hour window to eat food. And for the most part, most people generally are doing some form of intermittent fasting without knowing it. Let's say, for example, the last meal of the day, you have it at 7 p.m., and then you usually sleep in because you don't work anymore and you're just at home like everyone else. And so you eat breakfast at 1 p.m. Well, congratulations, you do some form of intermittent fasting. Now, number two, most people will notice results pretty much instantly. And the reason behind that is because if you are eating constantly, or you're eating junk food constantly, whatever it may be, your stomach's going to be pretty bloated because your body has to digest. And when people start an intermittent fasting approach, the first things they start to notice is, well, because they're going long periods of time without eating, they might actually feel like they're not as bloated, I guess. And so that means, I guess, they're losing weight, which really it doesn't. But because you are getting that change in visual appearance where, let's say last week, every day you were walking around with your belly just, completely sticking out and pushing your shirt out. And then now, because you just started intermittent fasting, because your body doesn't have that much food to digest, for the first time in a long time, your stomach is flat. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean you're losing fat or you've lost extra healthy weight. Really what it means is you're just not holding on to a lot of crap anymore, and your body can just stay in a pretty good spot. That's what you normally look like when your belly's not full of junk food. The other cool thing about intermittent fasting, which is the third thing, is that it pretty much portion controls for you. Now, there's nothing really magical about the intermittent fasting approach in terms of enhanced fat loss or whatever you may call it. But because you're limiting how many meals you eat into a 8-hour window, usually what happens is you're indirectly lowering your caloric intake without actually noticing it. So if you're gonna be following like some type of bodybuilder diet and you're eating 6 meals per day and you're like, well, I need to eat around 1,500 calories, you might have very small meals throughout the day. And so yeah, it feels like you're dieting, whereas when you do intermittent fasting, you might have 2 really large meals within an 8-hour window, and so you're stuffed. And because you're doing that fast, you're also promoting ketones, and those ketones will also help with your body being satiated. So in a way, it kind of handles the portion control by itself, but then again, I've also seen people who have gained weight doing intermittent fasting. Because at the end of the day, like we're gonna talk about with all these things, calories still matter. And while there may be specific health benefits that each one of these nutritional guidelines or these diets are doing, right? Like fasting, yes, it may promote ketones. Keto may reduce brain fog. It may lower your body's insulin production. While yes, all these individual health things are true and each one has its own little benefits, when it comes to weight gain or weight loss, calories control that. A lot of great health benefits when it comes to intermittent fasting. Some of the ones that I've seen that's really good is it can help cells regenerate. Now, there's probably a lot more research that needs to be done on this, but we talked about this before in prior videos, and it's this idea of autophagy. And when it comes to autophagy, it's pretty much when your body temporarily takes a period of time from processing food, and it's just focusing on eating the fat off of your body, and the body can also go through cell regeneration. This is something that's very unique to more of a 48-hour or even 72-hour fast. What really are the health benefits of it? Well, some people will try to claim that it can help you live longer, it can help to fight off free radical damage, and it can even help to, just reduce your overall risk for any type of heart-related issues, cancers, etc. While more research does have to be done on this topic, I do think there is some promising research out there when it comes to the benefits of fasting. I think the evidence is pretty strong for the most part that for right now, there's definitely health benefits to fasting every now and then. I think every single person can benefit from a fast at least once a week. Now, what are some of the flip sides of intermittent fasting? So when it comes to the negatives, do any exist? Honestly, I'd say it sucks when you first enter into a fast. If you've never fasted before in your life, it can seem very difficult. You're gonna be getting carb cravings, you're gonna be getting hunger pains, your appetite might go out of control, and you might just feel like, there's no way that I can do this. And so really, it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's more so a discipline in, well, how tough are you, right? Because once you get through the hunger pains and everything that is introduced in the beginning of a fast, you'll really start to reap a lot of the benefits and your body will adapt. And that's really what it comes down to, is just your body adapting. Whatever diet you try, there's always going to be this period of initial stress that happens until your body actually understands that, okay, we're continually getting this stress, so let's adapt to it. And then you'll start benefiting and reaping all the rewards once your body has now adapted to that style. Now let's look at plant-based. What do I think about plant-based? Well, it's very popular, number one. When it comes to your calories and your nutrition, same thing as before, prioritize protein. I believe that if every person who followed some type of vegan or vegetarian approach just focused on prioritizing protein, I think that a lot of the research that shows negative side effects, such as increased rates of depression, more prone to injury, etc., all the bad things that are surrounding things like vegetarian or vegan diets, those things would go away because protein handles all those things. So if you're going to go plant-based, just make sure that you're still getting 30 to 40% of your calories coming from protein, and then obviously the remainder is going to be coming from carbs, and you're probably going to have a lower amount coming from fat. So what might a vegan approach look like? Well, you might have something like 40% coming from protein, 40% coming from carbs, or heck, even 50% coming from carbs, and then the remainder coming from fat. If you're on a vegetarian approach and you don't really need to focus so much on being vegan, but you can add things like eggs, dairy, or even just fish, depending on which style of vegetarian you want to go. You can have something like 40% protein, maybe somewhere between 20 to 30 grams of carbs, and then the remainder coming from fat. And that would be a pretty good macronutrient ratio when it comes to this. So now, what are the top 3 things about plant-based? Well, there is some good research that kind of shows that, number one, it can reduce overall risk of heart disease and lower your blood pressure. A lot of people do say that, reducing overall meat consumption has helped them just feel better. This is more of like an individual thing, so I wouldn't say that it's conclusive that reducing meat in general for each person is better. I would just say that more than likely the person who felt better by getting rid of processed foods or meat, well, if it benefited them, then that's what works for them, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for you. So just something to keep in mind. And the last thing is, I think it's great for people to try something new. And I think that in general, if the idea of going plant-based is what helps you get started on your own fitness journey, then I think that that's a plus, because I think most people, when they try to say that, hey, I lost a lot of weight going plant-based or I lost a lot of weight going vegan, really they're coming from being a couch potato to then now reducing calories and just eating cleaner in general. So technically they could have done any diet, but it was just plant-based that they ended up falling into. And so I think that there's a lot of benefits there, and I think that if that is the diet that you are leaning more towards, and if it helps you get started, then I think go for it. I think in general, we can all benefit from adding more veggies to our meals. I don't see any issue with that. The only issue that I have with plant-based is that every person that I talk to who is an advocate for being vegan or vegetarian, they usually have an issue when it comes to consuming protein. And when you're vegetarian and you're vegan, some of the downsides can be, where do you find your protein sources? So you have things like tempeh, you have soy products, you have things like complete proteins from like quinoa. But the more you eat of those things, you run into risks of other things, right? I think there's a lot of good evidence that kind of shows that eating soy in large amounts just to hit your protein is probably not going to be the best thing. The other thing is, if you have to get the majority of your protein by combining different carb sources such as rice and beans or eating quinoa, you're also simultaneously going to be increasing your carb count, and that can be really hard when it comes to trying to manage body composition as best as you can. Out of all 3 of these, which one do I believe is the best? Well, the answer is the one that you can stick to. Now, I know you're really looking for an answer on this, and the one that I suggest the most is always going to be following some type of paleo or Mediterranean style diet, which is usually a good balance between everything. It's not too extreme on one end, it's somewhere right in the middle where you're focusing on good quality proteins from animal sources. You have your low starch or non-starchy vegetables. You're also focusing on getting in your low glycemic carbs and just getting a good variety of healthy fats throughout your meal. In my opinion, I mean, that is the best way to eat. And then if you want to go ahead and try the intermittent fasting method with that style of eating, I just think in general, you're probably going to lose fat a little bit quicker because you're probably controlling your calories a little bit better plus you're benefiting from all the health benefits of fast. So I know I said I would let you guys know exactly what I'm doing for my own nutrition, and pretty much it's just using Trifecta to get my own meals in and get my macros and pretty much just hit my protein. That's really what I've been focusing on for the last couple years, is really just prioritizing protein as much as possible. And then the thing that I tweak is carbohydrates. So if I'm focusing on getting leaner, I'll decrease carbohydrates. If I'm focusing on getting bigger and trying to put on as much muscle as possible, then I just increase my carbohydrates. But for the most part, my protein stays relatively the same, and my fats, they kind of go up or down depending on my hunger level. So the cool thing is Trifecta has made it extremely easy for you guys to choose a plan. All you have to do is just figure out, based on this video, did you want to try keto? Did you want to go vegan? Or do you want to just stick to something that's like basic, like a Mediterranean style diet? Man, they have you covered. They have so many different meal plans that you can choose from. Everything's already portioned out the right way. And the cool thing is you guys can get 40% off your first order if you just go and click the link in the description below and just make sure that you use the coupon code It's Time at checkout. And look guys, if you guys like this video, if you like this content, let me know by leaving a like, and then also make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button and click that little bell icon so that you stay notified for when these videos drop so you never miss an episode. And as always guys, stay strong and I'll see you next time.